Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and this morning I want to welcome you to my personal garage because for the past 24 hours I've had an all-new bike living underneath my roof, the new KTM 790 Duke. Now if you're not familiar with the Duke family, this is going to be the naked sport bikes within KTM's lineup, ranging from the small 390 entry-level Duke all the way up to the flagship model, the 1290 Super Duke R, and this new 790 slots itself right in the middle. And a lot of that's going to come from its 799cc all-new parallel twin engine, which is claiming around 105 horsepower, about 64 foot-pounds of torque, all with the dry weight set to be somewhere around 373 pounds. Now you throw that together with the sophisticated electronics package, which this 790 stole right from its older sibling, and this bike is shaping up to be a pretty fun ride. Now, the Austrian manufacturer has actually dubbed this bike the Scalpel, a nickname it's said to have earned based on its power to weight ratio, which lends itself to a very precise handling machine. So our goal for this first ride review is to take you out for a ride on the bike to see whether or not the 790 actually lives up to the nickname. So I want to kick things off by talking about probably my favorite feature on the bike, which is going to be the new engine in this motorcycle. And I think a lot of times we get distracted with horsepower figures and like that, but really in this instance it's more about how the bike just delivers this power. You have gobs of mid-range torque. This engine just feels so much bigger than it really is, and it spins up wickedly fast. So if you're not careful, you can look down and this thing's easily getting away from you. It's definitely not a bike that's going to be designed for beginners. This is definitely going to be a second or third bike purchase for a lot of people. I really like the throttle response too. In the sport mode, this thing has really sharp throttle response without being overly harsh. If I had any complaints, you know, when I'm in these lower speeds right now, kind of working through traffic, I feel like the fueling is a bit off below 4,000 RPM. You can see right now I'm trying to hold it steady and it's surging, almost like it's searching to where it wants to be. But as soon as I pull up above 4,000 RPM, it works just fine. The other thing to note too, as we're sitting here in traffic, is that the catalytic converter, which comes off the back of the engine, sits right between my feet, and the engine's definitely giving off quite a bit of heat. I notice it mostly, again, when I'm in these traffic situations. Once the bike is moving, it's less noticeable. Both of those things, the fueling as well as the catalytic converter, I think really speak to the fact that KTM is trying to meet emissions requirements with these bikes the same way all manufacturers are, and I have a feeling we're going to see more and more of this across the board. Now, I talked a minute ago about the throttle response, and throttle response is controlled by the rider mode that you select. And the rider modes are really at the core of the electronics package. You have rain, street, sport, and track, and they're going to control everything from throttle response to overall power, anti-wheelie mode, into your actual traction control. Not only is the traction control going to be lean angle sensitive, but so is the ABS. So depending on where I'm at in my lean angle, the computer will automatically regulate how ABS and traction control engages with the motorcycle itself. But by far my favorite feature on this bike from an electronics perspective has got to be the quick shifter. So if I get over here in the right lane, my hand's right here, I'm now in fourth, fifth, and I'm not doing anything. And then if I want to downshift, fourth, third, and I'm not moving my throttle at all. So there is a slipper clutch on this, but it also utilizes KTM's MSR technology, or motor slip regulation technology, which actually acts as an auto blipper for seamless downshifts. I mean, there's just a lot of really cool technology on this level of a bike. But like I said in the very beginning of this video, the nickname that KTM went with this thing is going to be the Scalpel, and we can't talk about this bike without talking about the handling. And you talk about a bike that just handles perfectly for these tight, windy roads. I mean, this is it. I think KTM did it with the balance of weight, the power, a little bit more aggressive steering geometry, but then you also have a slightly longer wheelbase, and that adds for stability. So when you're cruising on the highway at 70, 80 miles an hour, it feels stable there as well. if I had to pick any complaints with the bike from a handling perspective, it's simply that my suspension on this isn't adjustable, and it's tuned a little bit more towards a sportier experience. Now, you do have a preload adjuster in the rear, but that's about it. And when you get through some of these, bumpier Philly roads, it actually comes across as a bit harsh in its ride, and I would love to be able to adjust some of that out. So I think if I was going to make one of these mine, I would probably be looking towards the aftermarket to see, what kind of adjustability I could add back into the suspension. But I am having a blast with this motorcycle, and I'm going to go see if I can find a place to pull over after I ride a little bit more, and we'll dive into some final thoughts.
With an MSRP of around $10,500, the KTM 790 Duke comes pretty well equipped right out of the gate. I mean, you have a killer engine, you've got handling that lives up to the Scalpel nickname, and you've got a sophisticated electronics package that's going to rival most bikes out in the street today. So what does it compare against? I mean, you could argue that, maybe this would compare against something like an MT-07, a Z650, or an SV650, but that's not really a fair argument. I mean, this thing outguns it from a performance standpoint, and it costs around $3,000 more. I mean, maybe a premium twin like a BMW F800R, but I still think the KTM is going to take it. I think for most folks, they're going to be looking at this against something like maybe an MT-09 or a Z900. Both of those bikes cost a little bit less, they make a little more top-end power, but I don't think they have the character of the engine that the 790 is going to give you, and I also don't think that they have the same electronics and handling. I mean, really, to get the same electronics at a middleweight, you'd be looking at something like a Street Triple RS, and that's a bike that's going to carry a $2,000 premium over the 790. So I think my big takeaway here is that KTM built a very unique bike that doesn't necessarily have any direct competitor within the naked sport bike segment. And that's not to say that this bike is perfect. Like I mentioned earlier when I was riding, I would love to have adjustability with the suspension on this. The exhaust over on the right-hand side really smashes up against my right heel, and I can't get a placement that I really enjoy. I've had similar problems with Kawasaki's recently, and there is a tremendous amount of heat coming off of this engine. I own a 1090 Adventure R, so I'm used to the heat that a KTM can put off. But if you're not, or if you know that you're sensitive to engine heat, that's definitely going to be a consideration here. But a lot of those nitpicks can be fixed in the aftermarket. The one thing you really can't fix in the aftermarket is engine performance. And engine performance is not a problem that the 790 has. I mean, this engine is literally fantastic, and I can see it really becoming a platform engine for a lot of future KTM models, particularly the 790 Adventure R, which is slated to come out next year. If it's that good in a street bike, I can't wait to see how this engine fares in the adventure segment. Now, there's a lot to chew on here, and a lot of which we just didn't have time to dive into in this first ride video review. So if you want more information on the 790 Duke, now's the time you want to head over to Common Tread, where you can read my first ride review article. And as always, you want to make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up with all the content we have rolling out at RevZilla.com. I want to thank you for joining us today for this first ride of the 790 Duke from KTM. I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.